Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. This video will probably be trash. I have no idea how well it'll work. I'm on the interstate. So I'm on my way. I'm doing a Republican event, Rally at the Rock. It's going to be tomorrow morning. And my co-host of my radio show, Carlos, has generously invited me to his house. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing here. If you're watching, let me know if the sound's okay. Last time I tried to do something like this, my phone overheated. So if you see me disappear quickly, it could either be that or that the internet went out. So I just figured I would try it because I'm bored and I'm driving and I like hearing myself talk. So, if you're listening, just let me know if the sound's okay. Is the hum of the car too much? Things like that. So, sounds okay. Good. Yeah, so if you're new to my channel, by the way, these aren't my normal videos. It's just I'm so busy. Sometimes I just like to rant in the car. Of course, safety is the most important thing. Got my seatbelt on, I'm paying attention to the road, so clearly I won't be able to see your comments the vast majority of the time. I apologize for that. And normally my videos are higher quality than this, but it is what it is. So yeah, I did the radio show today. I thought it went very well. We had Representative Diamond on. I really like what he had to say. I did have one person who's a friend of mine on the left was upset with Representative Diamond's shirt because he saw it as jesting at COVID. I don't know. I could see how you could say I don't want an elected leader. His shirt, by the way, just said COVID state champs for Lebanon. He's saying it for a reason because of the tyrant Tom Wolf trying to intentionally harm the people of Lebanon County by withholding COVID funding because he dislikes Diamond personally. But fair enough. I can see how that would upset you on the left. I just ask you I implore you, maybe you should still try to listen to what he says. And to me, it's far less offensive than Democrat tyrant Tom Wolf telling everyone that's worried that they can't go to work and feed their family that they're cowards. So to me, that's far away. But I just thought it was that was a report I got. I thought it was worth letting you all know. Yeah, so I thought it was a good show. We had a lot to talk about. There was so much on our plate that we didn't get to. So apologize for that. So let me just hit some random topics that I'd like to talk about. We talked about kind of my interactions with people in the debate community through my Facebook page. There's also been other people that, I have to, let me first say this. If you're watching this, and I'll try to get this video up on Facebook because many of my I have far more left-wing people that see my stuff on Facebook than would see it here on YouTube. And the reason is I have Facebook. I started when I was in college. I had a lot of left-wing friends from the debate community there, and I also had a lot of just left-wing friends elsewhere at the time. Many of those people are still my friends. Many of people from the debate community that have been criticizing me are still my friends. Even the person, if you're listening, that first criticized me, I actually, I'm not going to mention any names, but as a judge, even though I thought that we had different politics, I honestly do think that person as a judge at least helped me know how to be more persuasive to people that shared his politics. And I thought that you were a reasonable person. I do. And I have no hard feelings despite the fact that we're snarky. I would like to take this time to apologize for one quick second. I can't help myself. I get into this debate mode. Sometimes I get heated with people. I don't apologize for that necessarily, but what I do apologize for is I don't think people are like me, and I forget that. And when I mean I don't think people are like me, like I could be furious about an issue with someone and just yelling and screaming about it. That doesn't mean I hate that person at all. That doesn't even mean that I think they're a terrible person. And I might make arguments that I find reciprocal. So for example, which isn't always the best things, but you might say, I think your position's racist, Rob, and I might be like, oh yeah? Well, I find you to be a racist because X, Y, and Z. Now that doesn't mean that I'm sitting there thinking like, you're a, person beyond the pale and I can't talk with you. So if you're one of my friends from Facebook and you're like, I can't stand Rob, we just had this big Facebook blow up, I'll say two things about it. That doesn't mean I hate you. I still think I'm right. I stand by all the things I said, but maybe I could do it in a more polite way. But for me, I'm not, saying it out of place to wishing harm on any of you. I'm not. And secondly, to say about it. I do think that one of the problems with Facebook is it's maybe I'm misinterpreting what people are saying, the tone of it, and so then my tone gets misinterpreted a little, and it escalates into like you're basically screaming at each other with words, whereas if you were sitting down face to face, you could have the same disagreement, but be like, okay, I see where you're coming from, so maybe that's what's happening. So yeah, I just want to say that please don't think that I hate you or anything like that if I disagree with you. You know, I'm not saying I'll never hate anyone, I'm not saying that, but as far as the people I've been interacting with online, I don't feel that way. Now, to those of you that like the fact that I seem to be more aggressive here in the past week or so, yeah, I don't mind. Don't worry, you're not going to see Soft Rob that just is afraid to stand up for himself. I will always stand up for myself. I will stand up for the people that I feel don't have as much of a voice. I'll stand up for the people that I know are great people that help make this country what it is, that don't have a voice, and that is my community that I know the most about, which happens to be mostly rural, but even more than that is hardworking Americans of all creeds, of all religions, of all ethnic backgrounds, of all sexual orientations that I feel have been screwed over by this country. I don't know what it's like to live in the inner city. I don't. But I could relate to this. I understand the frustration that you would have growing up in the inner city, how you have people in positions of power that seem to either make your life worse or just ignore you until it's convenient. I think when I look at the poor people that I see in rural America, I can understand the similarities of poor people I see in the inner city. I also think I would never claim that my life growing up was as hard as someone who grew up in the inner city. Growing up in poverty in rural America is different than growing up in poverty in the inner city. I totally understand that. But that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to look at the situation and see how the people in charge that are embracing these ideas that we're told means that they care about insert group. We care about women, hashtag believe all women. We care about the LGBT community. We care about the black community. In reality, I think that the policies that they're offering make lives worse for all of those people. So one of the things I'm going to do, and I'll do an actual better video on this when I'm at my home office, but for those people and for everyone, I want to make something clear. I am not saying that I don't think that there's tragedies and horrible situations that many different groups of people go through, including those in the inner city. I'm not saying that. Anyone who's followed my channel for any length of time knows that I'm not saying that. And let me give you an example. I repeatedly talk about, I think some of the greatest Americans that ever lived, including to this day, are people that somehow overcame the massive challenges that they face in the inner cities and contribute greatly to our society. They are people with more moral character than I would ever have. If I grew up in that situation, I would have fell into gangs. I know it. I basically became a drunk in college, and I wasn't in a situation like that. So I'm not saying that I'm somehow better than those people. I'm not, and I mean that if they're on the right or the left, I don't care, right? I think some of the greatest Americans we ever saw were slaves that were freed, that said, all we want is an opportunity to show to you that if you leave us benefit from our own hard work, if you stop oppressing us, that we can achieve. That's tremendous, the people that did that. Is my audio still good, by the way? I just asked because I noticed people were leaving. It might just be that I'm uninteresting. But yeah, someone just let me know if the audio is good. So I truly believe that. Okay, good. Now, I'll go through a comprehensive list and do a full video on this, but understand this. I'm not saying when I criticize Black Lives Matter that I don't care about Black lives. Again, another thing, if you followed my channel, I've told you how when I ran as a Republican and worked with the Republican Party, one of the things that angered me the most about them was when I said, what are we doing to reach out to inner city communities? They basically told me we go after hanging fruit. Oh, 1 second. Officer put someone over here. He's kind of close to the road. Okay. Want to make back. Sorry. That might happen from time to time. I have no idea on this stretch of Interstate 80 what the reception will be like. But I think that, what was I saying? That's a big frustration I have. I can't blame inner city people for not voting for Republican when Republicans say we're just not going to go into the inner cities. As someone who cares about conservative principles, though there are certainly left-wing positions I hold, socially a lot of things I seem to align with the left. For example, I'm for gay marriage. A lot of Republicans hate that. I am against judging people for sins of the fathers. That's what we see happen in the white community all the time. You're responsible for things that your forefathers did. That's absurd. But because of that, I don't think we should punish DACA people who were brought here as children through no fault of their own. I don't think they should be punished for that. I think that they should be granted citizenship, as long as they haven't committed crimes and things like that, obviously. Those aren't necessarily popular Republican positions. There are other things. I'm against a lot of what I saw as the neocon wars. I was against Bush. I was against Mitt Romney. I thought that they screwed over Ron Paul. I talk about the Republicans all the time, and not the best light. So by no means do I view myself, I guess all that matters is what I am really. I guess I'm biased, but I don't view myself as strictly a partisan. I don't. And I understand that what I want, I think, supersedes party. I care about this country and all the people within it. I really do. Now, I'm biased like anyone else. But I understand that that there's reasons to not want to vote for my party. I don't expect people to just say, oh, Rob's right, so we're going to agree with him with everything. That's ridiculous. And I don't expect everyone to say, well, we're going to vote Republican because of, whatever reason. Of course, that's ridiculous. If the Republicans are unwilling to reach out to people, I don't expect them to vote Republican, nor the other party is. In many ways, a party that has bad ideas and is keeping you oppressed, at least they pretend to talk to you. Many times we don't see that with Republicans. And that's a failure of the Republican Party. It is. So I'm not judging people for that. I think if we started to go in the inner city with the simple message of, we judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. We're going to stop saying everything is racist. We're going to stop treating you like children and saying, oh, you're just a monolithic member of your race. If you don't vote for us, you're not really black. That's them. That's the Democratic Party. We're going to stop doing that. Then I think after decades of proving that we're serious, or at least a long time of proving we're serious, I think we'll start to see inner city communities say, yes, that's an idea we could get behind. Maybe not, but it's irrelevant. When I ran for Congress, I was running to represent people that voted for me and people that did not vote for me. The right thing to do is to represent people regardless if they vote for you or not. And so the right thing for the Republican Party to do is to reach out to all communities, even if those communities will never vote for you. You should still be reaching out. That's what I believe, and I've criticized the Republicans on that. I've talked about all sorts of things that affect the inner city communities. Here's what I'm trying to say. The reason I don't like Black Lives Matter is because I think Black Lives Matter. I don't like the organization Black Lives Matter because I think they are a left-wing, sort of globalist, Marxist, terrorist organization. That's what I think. And if you think that's hyperbole, fine. Let me be more specific. I think the policies suggested and offered up, along with the strategies of endorsing or deflecting for violence in the movement, along with the hypercritical focus on race that leads to racism of all stripes, is detrimental to the United States and most specifically to the Black community. I think policies like dismantling the structures of the nuclear family will have immediate and drastic impacts on inner city Black communities, which one of the best solutions we could offer would be to encourage two-parent families. That's what I think. I even go further than that. Here's another thing I disagree with Republicans. When I say two-parent families, I think probably that we have a statistical body of research that says that having a man and a woman as those two parents is probably the preference. However, we have such a problem with single parenthood. I have no problem with same-sex adoptions. None. Two loving parents are two loving parents, period. I support that nuclear family of 2 parents, no matter what that family looks like as far as sexuality and things like that. I know that there are people in the Republican Party that disagree with me. That's fine. I think you're wrong. I totally supported gay marriage. I totally support the tragedy that I see with kids that are in the foster system or kids that grow up in single-parent households with barely any parents sometimes. I want to see them in loving families. I'm not concerned about the sexuality of those people. I say that a lot. But somehow I'm still considered this bigot. I'm still considered someone that doesn't care about issues. It's ridiculous. The reason I don't like Black Lives Matter is in part that. That's one of the biggest reasons. One of the best things we could do to help all communities, especially inner city Black communities, where fathers are so absent. And we can talk about the reasons. You might say the war on drugs. I agree. I think we should be lowering the war on drugs. I think it's been an unmitigated disaster. I think there are other reasons too. It's not just always an outsider's fault. There are certainly that lead to detriment of communities. But that 2-parent household is so important. In the early 1960s, a Democrat, Patrick Moynihan, commissioned a report that said that 25% of children born in the Black community were born out of wedlock, and that was a disaster. And so part of the reasons for the war on poverty was to end that, to lower that number, because we wanted more parents that were married having children, 2-parent households. That number since the war on poverty has increased to 75%. It's a disaster. I think endorsing violence and this hypercritical focus on race and saying, oh, even if you're a poor white person, even if you're a homeless white person, you still have your white privilege, and everything that happens in this community is just a result of racism. That's a mistake. When we say that something like racism is responsible for all the ills, how can we solve that problem? Racism is inevitable. We should fight to lower racism as much as possible, but it will always exist. When you're not specific about what's causing problems, you will never get solutions. So when you base the problem off a lie, oh, well, violence in the Black community is all about hunting unarmed Black men for sport because they're racist. That's not what it is. That's not what it is at all. And so when you identify that as the problem, how can you solve it? You can't. And so what we see is a lot of the problems in the inner city Black community are problems that we share across races. Exploitation of that community by people that claim to stand up for it. I know what that's like. I voted for politicians my whole life that said, I got your back, Rob. I got your community's back. And then they didn't do anything. Then they outsourced jobs. Then they raised my taxes. They made the purchasing power to work fit just to pay the same bills that I used to. I know what it's like to have the people keep saying, yes, yes, that's Republicans that have done that to me. That's who I voted for. I totally understand it. I get it. I'm not, right? I understand. And I'm seeing through Black Lives Matter. We keep hearing, you know, I talked to a gentleman the other day, Penguin, on my channel. He kept saying, the reason I'm for Black Lives Matter is that it will lead to politicians that will change things. Who? If there's systemic racism, if the institutions are racist, which institutions? Well, we keep talking about law enforcement. That's not necessarily, that's usually not federal law enforcement. It's state and local law enforcement. So in the places where we see these inner city Black communities allegedly have rampant systemic racism and institutional racism in police departments, who's controlling those departments? Democrats. Now, I'm not saying this just to be partisan, but what I'm saying is, how do you have Democrats that have controlled these institutions for 50, 60 years? Literally, some politicians that are Democrats have been there for 40 years. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi. If there's institutional racism, how can you point to the people that control those institutions to fight that racism? And institutions aren't just politics, they're also corporations, they're also the media, they're also academia, they're also Silicon Valley, the entertainment industry. All of these are institutions that help shape our country. If there's so widespread institutional racism, why is it that... Coming back. There I am. All right, sorry about that. Again, I'll lose you from point to point, but... So let me get this straight. The institutions that are racist are supporting a movement to end institutional racism. That's what I'm supposed to believe? It's nonsense. This is a revolution designed to cause a divide, because as long as we're focused on race, as long as we say white privilege and the evils of whiteness, and it doesn't matter if you're poor and white, you still have privilege. And as long as we tell other communities, you'll always be a victim. This country's stacked against you because of your skin color. Everything's racist. It's all racism. As long as we keep that divide going, no one looks at the real problem, do they? No one looks and says, these people that we've elected, the people that we put in positions of power, whether it be culturally or politically, they don't care about average working people. They don't care at all. On both sides of the ledger. There are individuals within each side that may, but as a whole, our political and cultural system has failed the majority of Americans. It has. But we don't talk about it. We leave LeBron James, a billionaire, I think he's a billionaire, at least very wealthy, one of the most powerful, influential figures in the history of the world, we leave him lecture us on privilege. We leave him have business ties with China as they in turn, how many Uyghur Muslims, as they crack down on Hong Kong protesters, he has a personal business relationship. Yet he tells people, don't criticize them, don't criticize China, as he lectures the United States about how racist it is. We have companies like Nike that are so supporting of Kaepernick and Black Lives Matter that are running sweatshops. We have banks like Chase Bank that was partially responsible for the 2008 financial crisis that screwed working class people of all colors and faiths over in the 2008 crisis. As long as they put Black Lives Matter up in their window, their building doesn't get torched. It's nonsense. It's cheap words. You heard the story in my radio show of what's going on with this Myrtle Beach story in Williamsport. Long story short, the school district of Williamsport, they had a baseball trip. The team, in a hazing effort, took, I believe, at least 2 students on the baseball team, and they were sexually assaulted. They filmed it. They placed it on Facebook. They laughed about it. They mocked these kids. The school district covered it up. They lied to investigators. Now, 2 years later, thanks to great reporting from my co-host, Todd Bart. Sorry about that. Again, it means that I recognize there are problems and think that the proposed solution that's being offered by Black Lives Matter and by the Democrats and by the corporations and by academia, I think that it's made the problems worse. It is arrogant to say, if you don't agree with me, then clearly you don't agree with the problems that I think are problems. That's arrogance. That's foolishness. And so when people tell me, if you don't agree that this is all racism, if you don't agree that all whites have privilege, if you don't agree that Black Lives Matter is great, then clearly you must harbor racist feelings. You must not care about problems in the black community. That's not true. I've had people on Facebook, I've had people on my videos say repeatedly things like this. Oh, so you don't care about George Floyd's murder? Absolutely not the case. In fact, I'll go a step further. Have you heard me on my channel really go off about George Floyd as a bad person? He was a bad person. He pointed a gun at a pregnant woman's stomach. Terrible. But I don't spend much time on that. You want to know why? Because although it's true, and it does raise questions as to why he's deified the way he is, he didn't deserve to die. I don't talk much about the fentanyl and stuff in his system. It promptly turns out that he was having a heart attack even before he was thrown to the ground. However, I've said consistently that doesn't excuse the act onto him. It does not. There are questions, is it first degree murder? I certainly don't think that's the case. But I hope that that cop is charged. And if the policy is that that sort of maneuver is allowed, as some people have argued, though in my reading it's still not, it's allowed to be temporary but not for that length of time, then that policy's wrong. I haven't made excuses for that. I've been steadfast. Every single time that an issue's been brought to my awareness where it's a tragic death, whether it be the cops caused it or some other cop, I say that's terrible. Never once have I said, like, people keep saying, oh, what about Charlottesville? It was terrible. I call out white identitarianism all the time. I think identity politics is cancer, regardless if it's white, Hispanic, Asian, black. I think it's all bad. I think people that are harming people for racial motivations are disgusting, regardless of the skin color of the perpetrators. I've had people tell me it's clear that me bringing up Cannon Hinton, the 5-year murder, it's clear that I'm implying he was murdered for being white or because of racism. I never once said that. I didn't remotely suggest that. I suggested the reason the media wasn't covering the story was in part because the races of the perpetrator and the victim, but never once did I say racism was the motivation for his murder. People look at me like, oh, well, you know, what about this? What about this situation? What about Dylan Roof? Dylan Roof's despicable. Absolutely disgusting. What about the Christchurch shooting? Absolutely disgusting. I've said repeated, even on the other side of the ledger, when Steve Scalise got shot and a Republican Phil got shot up by a Bernie Sanders supporter, I defended Bernie Sanders. I said, this isn't Bernie's fault. No, he was a hypocrite. I called that out because Bernie Sanders fundraised off the shooting of Congressman Gifford and said that this was a result of right-wing violence and right-wing rhetoric. And then when one of his supporters shot people, he said all violence is bad, all rhetoric is bad. So he was a hypocrite. But I said it wasn't his fault. I believe that. It's not that I don't care about these problems. That's not what's happening. It's that I think the proposed solution that many of these people are offering would make it so much worse. And I also think that if you're looking at me and you're saying, well, the fact that you don't talk about X death or Y death in the black community must prove you don't care about black lives, I don't think you're listening to me. I am talking about those issues. But my counter to that would be, why is it then when I bring up, look, these riots are predominantly occurring in inner city multiracial neighborhoods or black neighborhoods. These are the people, it's not happening in Beverly Hills. It's not happening in rural America where most of the people are white. It's happening in multiracial towns. Business owners, homeowners, property destroyed, lives upended because of these riots. Democrat Michael Tracy, who's not a Trump fan at all, has said he's shocked as he traveled across the country and talked to people of all races in every city he was in, pointing out the devastation that these riots led to, that the media refuses to cover. Why is it that you would support a movement that is targeting with violence and property destruction inner city black communities? Now, I don't think you're ignoring that because you're racist and you hate black people. That's not what I'm suggesting. That's what many people suggest of me. I think you don't know that the problem is as widespread as it is, or that you're buying the narrative, well, it's all worth it. It's destruction that's worth it because Black Lives Matter will help black people. I disagree. I don't mind anyone at all coming in and saying, Rob, you're wrong. Your plans for the what's my plans for the black community? I already said. We need to stop focusing on sins of the past. We need to start saying whatever your gender is, your race, your religion, your ethnicity, our role as government is to treat people as individuals. We're going to stop having policies based on what your race is. And now certainly there are some noted exceptions. Like, for example, you need to have some difference between men and women just because of the biological difference. So there's got to be limited laws that are different. You know, if you're talking about paternity leave, things like that, laws that have to do with like a woman when she's pregnant. I understand that. I'm not saying that literal physical differences, right? But as far as the vast generality of our policies should be equality for all. Equity for all, not equal outcomes, but equal opportunities. That should be our goal. And I think if we stop treating communities like the inner city black community as though, nothing's their fault. They don't have personal agency. Everything negative that happens is the result of outside forces and racism and blah, blah, blah. And they need a leg up. And this victimhood culture, if we'd stop that within a generation or two, I think that we'd be shocked to see that, guess what? The black community, every bit as capable as every other community. I wouldn't be shocked. I know it. I was in the debate community and saw intelligent black people that destroyed me all the time. Some of my friends that aren't in the debate community are black are some of the smartest, awesomest, wisest people I've ever met. So it's no surprise to me. So if you say, I think you're wrong, Rob, that's fine. I don't mind that. We can have that discussion. I think that my plan's best, but I'm also smart enough to know I'm dumb and I don't have all the answers. But I'm not a racist. I'm not ignoring the plight of black people. Regardless if you think that the reason there's so much violence in the black community is because of racism or because of a litany of other reasons or a combination thereof, it's still a problem. Regardless of what we call it, it needs to be fixed. I think focusing on it as just an act of racism is a terrible mistake because we keep doing that and the problem doesn't get better. In fact, the more we do it, it seems the worse the problem becomes. Again, you might say, you're wrong, Rob. Fine, you disagree with me. That doesn't make me an immoral person. That doesn't mean I don't care about the issue. Again, I talked about this on the show the other day. Why is it that I had so many friends and people on the left that told me when I voted for Donald Trump, oh, you're a racist? Why? Well, I think Trump's a racist. I don't think Trump is a racist, but let's say you do. That doesn't mean that I'm a racist if I voted for him. By the same token, I think Hillary Clinton's a bloodthirsty, maniacal, vindictive person who attacked alleged sexual assault victims of her husband, who wanted to bomb countries and did so all the time, who laughed when Muammar Gaddafi was tortured. We came, we saw, he died. Who was involved in foreign change wars and leading them that led to thousands of innocent people dying. If you voted for Hillary Clinton, I don't think you're an immoral, bloodthirsty monster that wants to drop bombs on innocent people. I think you probably said, I don't see it that way, or I favor her other positions, or I think she was better than Donald Trump. That's fine. I didn't go to one person, not one person that voted for Hillary Clinton, despite my obvious dislike of her, and say, I don't want to be friends with you because you voted for Hillary Clinton. I think you're an immoral person for voting for Hillary Clinton. I didn't do that to one person, not one. Yet I get that treatment all the time. Why is that? Could it be that I just disagree with you, but I'm not an immoral person? Could that be the case? It's just incredibly frustrating. Here's another thing, by the way. Like, the left is the party that cares about inner city. One of the greatest things we've seen, I talked about the two parents being important, and I mean, it's just so unbelievable to me. If you're Black Lives Matter and you're an organization that supposedly cares about deteriorating conditions in the black people, or violent police interactions, or violence in general in the black community, poverty in the black community, why in the world would you be against the nuclear family? Why would you be against that? You didn't have, even if you feel that, why would that be one of your missions? I think the reason is because they don't want that community to be better. It's a political movement, and they're using the terrible situations that occur in many inner cities as an advantage to obtain power. I think the ideas that they espouse sometimes of like black-only spaces and things like that, that's segregation. That's wrong. I was against it when white people tried to do that. I'm against it when black people tried to do that. I think the focus on all of us as primarily our skin color was wrong when people in the KKK tried to do it, and when people like Richard Spencer tried to do it, and I think it's wrong when people in the black community want to do it. I think that white nationalist movements like Richard Spencer's are horrible. I think that black nationalist movements like the Nation of Islam, which has ties to Black Lives Matter and actually did security at the funeral of George Floyd, they're wrong too. I think, so all of this stuff's occurring. I don't understand. My position's very clear. You might think I'm wrong. You might think that my strategy's ineffectual. But I'm very clear that I think identity politics and this focus on it's all because of my skin color, racism's wrong. Couldn't racism exist? Yes. When it exists specifically and you see this specific example, absolutely call it out. But that's my feelings on this situation. One of the greatest things that could help the black community and all communities is school choice. Charter schools. The evidence is overwhelming. Inner city students that go to charter schools receive such a greater education. Our education system is a failure everywhere, particularly in the inner city communities. And it's not just a problem of throw more money at it. We throw more money, the results never get better. The teachers' unions are cancerous to this country. We've turned education from educating people to prepare them to have successful lives to indoctrinating kids so that they endorse certain political movements. It's a farce. It's dangerous. Yet somehow, all the evidence shows how successful these charter schools are. Black Lives Matter's against it. The teachers' unions are against it. The Democrats are against it. Why? Why would you be against two-parent households? Why would you be against charter schools? If those things, even if you don't think it's a slam dunk case, why wouldn't we at least have a conversation? Can these help inner cities? I think they can. But no, it's just a no. Why wouldn't you allow parents to choose if they want to send their kids to a private school? Put the money in their hands and make that choice. That should be the case everywhere. Certainly, a lot of the wealthy white people, they send their kids to private schools. They like having those opportunities to pick which school is best for their child. Why wouldn't we grant that same courtesy to inner city blacks? What's the problem? Well, the teachers' unions are against that. And so we have to continue to send them to failed schools where they don't get successful educational opportunities. And then we wonder why there's a lot of problems that occur. When we encourage single-parent families, when we don't give education opportunities, I don't blame. How could you point a finger? It's a tragedy. It's horrible. I didn't go to the best school, but let me tell you some privileges I had. I had a two-parent household that really cared about me. I had a school that, although it wasn't the greatest school in the world, I didn't have to worry about violence when I was in that school. At all. Now, is this racism? Is that what's going on? Do you think the teachers' unions are racist against blacks? I don't see proof that it's racism. I see that it's just power hungry. It has to do with treating people poorly, not because they're black, but because they're in the inner city. But again, we could quibble about what the definition is. I'm going to extend a formal invitation on a video on its own to a lot of my friends in the debate community and friends that are left-winger to please come on and state your case about systemic racism. You could be right. I'm willing to hear the evidence. I think that focusing on it is a mistake. I think that just like I've argued with so many people this week that say, oh, when you point out white people that are killed by the cops like Tony Timpa, or if you put out Daniel Shader, white people that were killed by the cops, they weren't killed for their skin color like George Floyd. Show me the proof. Show me the proof that George Floyd was killed for his skin color. Show me the proof. There's just as much evidence that 5-year-old Cannon Hennon, who was killed by a black man who's white, was killed for his skin color, as there is that George Floyd was killed for his skin color. In other words, zero, which is why I haven't made claim that Cannon Hinton was killed for being white. I haven't even insinuated it. I have not seen one piece of evidence that George Floyd was killed for being black. Not one. Yet it's just assumed. If you misidentified the reason for that heinous action, then you can't solve actions like that that are heinous. Oh, but it's clear. You think that would have happened to a white man? Yes, look at the case of Tony Timpa. Unlike the case of George Floyd, where there was an arrest 4 days later, that wasn't the case with Tony Timpa. It took years to even get the body cam footage. And then after that, everyone was exonerated. No one was criminally prosecuted, or found guilty criminally. So if your only evidence this was racial was, well, it wouldn't happen to a white person, that's not true. It does and has. When you're saying it has to do with systemic racism in the institution of the police, and I say maybe there's more reason, the better reason is there are more violent interactions between inner city black communities and police officer because there's more violence in the inner city communities. And your response is, but that violence exists because of racism. Okay, fine, let's have that discussion. But that doesn't prove the institution of the police is racist. That doesn't prove we should be burning down police precincts. Perhaps the problem with policing isn't that they're racist, it's that there's bad policing all around that affects people of all skin color. But again, even that's only one side of the story. Yes, we should be critical of bad police policies and bad police officers. Yes, we should be critical when they don't face justice. I'm with you 100%. But when you just say because of race, because of race, because of race, that's not necessarily the truth. And then when you pretend that ACAB, all cops are bastards, that's horrendous. That's the type of mentality that comes from saying this is racism. Then all of a sudden you're suggesting things like completely eliminating the police, like Black Lives Matter in Minneapolis is doing, or like they've done in Seattle. Then violence goes up in inner city communities. So because you misidentified the problem and said it was all about race, we weren't actually able to have real solutions that were able to solve interactions with black communities, white communities, poor communities, etc. with police officers. That's what happens when you have these simplistic worldviews that says everything's racism. That's the problem. All white people have privilege no matter what. That's just the truth. When you have those overarching simplistic, everything's patriarchy, everything's racism, you're never going to get real world solutions. You end up with people like Chaz. Well, they solved it, didn't they? They got rid of the racist police. There we go. No more racist police. Oh, what's that? Within 2 weeks, it was a complete disaster. Violence and extortion and assaults and murders by their security force, their police. On audio, you could hear them put dozens of bullets into a car of a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old black kids, murdering, I believe, the 16-year-old. They shot him, and then you could hear on audio, they say, he's still breathing, pat, 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 and put more bullets in his head. Something more heinous than any police video I've seen. Yet that was the summer of love, right? That's how twisted it gets. Cheering for riots or deflecting for riots or setting up places like that Chaz zone that lead to actual murders, deaths. And then you have to be like, well, we didn't intend that, or whatever, ignore it. But that's the predictable consequence. That's why I'm against that movement. The biggest fear of these, and I'm not talking about the average person supporting Black Lives Matter. I'm talking about the people that are running the show. I'm talking about the institutions that are backing it. I'm talking about the elites in this country. Their biggest fear is that people of all creeds and ethnicity that are working class Americans, or that are, struggling to get by, living paycheck to paycheck, their biggest fear is they'll look at each other and say, geez, the black man and the white man, and the black woman and white woman, and the straight man and the gay man, and the working class atheist and working class Muslim and working class Christian, they have more in common together than all these elites that claim to speak for these separate groups. They don't want that. They don't want that at all. And so we're told, well, no matter what your situation is, if you're white, you have privilege. You got that privilege. Oh, and the reason, it's all racism, it's all sexism, all these problems. Did you know there's a proposition in California called Proposition 209, I believe. Proposition 209, it's 37 words, and it says basically this: there shall not be preference or discrimination given in public hiring of, public universities, public jobs, etc., based on skin color, gender, religion, etc. In other words, we should not have our government discriminating or giving preferential treatment to people based on their race, based on their gender, based on their sexual preference. Couldn't agree more. There shouldn't be a less controversial statement. Kamala Harris and the Democrats are overturning that. They're literally going from, we should judge people by the content of their character, to, no. The most important thing is to judge you by the color of your skin. The vice presidential candidate, who in effect will be the president for the Democratic Party, who, believe what you want, it has a chance to win and become the...
Miles, take exit 173 onto PA 64.
Whoops, I'm sure you heard that. My phone yammering at me here. Was chosen primarily because of her skin color and her gender. That is the opposite of all people created equal, judged by the content of your character and not the color of your skin. Now, am I saying if you vote for Kamala Harris, you're racist? No, not at all. But that's the sort of racism that's occurring. I had someone tell me today, and I grant I was being snarky, right? I'll grant that. We're having a discussion on Facebook. And basically they're telling me I don't care about problems in the black community because of white privilege or something, and I'm a racist, or it seems like I'm a racist for not caring about the black community. That's not the truth at all. And I just say, look, because I brought up the deaths of Tony Timpa and Daniel Shaver, white people that were killed by the police. I said the fact that you couldn't even condemn this, that you just had to say, oh, if you talk about that, you don't care about the black community, shows that you don't care about the white community. And you think that they had privilege, so it's not worth talking about. I said that those are examples of potential white racism, if I'm going to be accused of anti-black racism. And her response was, LOL, that doesn't exist. That's white privilege. You can't be racist to white people. That's white privilege. That's nonsense. It's an excuse. It's what allows powerful people that have exploited so many people like Oprah Winfrey to say, oh, don't look at my privilege. I'm one of those powerful people in the history of the world. It's those white people that have privilege. But the point I'm trying to make here is real simple. I'm willing to bring someone on. I could be wrong. Someone might come on and give me a compelling case about how all of these problems are caused by racism. I don't see it. I think in effect there is a sort of racism. There's this racism. I talk about, here's one privilege that comes with being white. It's the same privilege that comes with being a man. It's the same privilege that comes with being a conservative, especially if you're a Trump supporter. It's the same privilege that comes with being a Christian. And I'm not joking. I really mean this. There is one privilege that I clearly see with that. And that privilege is that you will be challenged. Because of those immutable characteristics, such as your skin color, or because of your religious preference, or because of your political persuasion, happening to be conservative or a Trump supporter, you will be challenged. And that's a good thing. You should want people to disagree with you. You should want people to challenge your beliefs. Being challenged just for your skin color is bad, but those other things are okay. And so that provided me an opportunity to be sharpened, to hone myself. I'm not saying that I'm perfect or anything like that, but I don't go through life expecting that everything's sunshine and roses and everyone will agree with me and there won't be pushback. Of course there'll be pushback. Of course, I understand that. So many people that we see that are having such a difficult time when they see people that disagree with them have gone through an education system that said everyone agrees with you. And if they don't, they're horrible, immoral people. It's why you see like Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago the other day. The chief of police in Chicago, after these lootings and riots happened the other day here, we finally had a media person that asked a hard question. He said, do you think that a lot of the reasons for these looting and riots were because last time they did it, there weren't any consequences? And the chief of police starts saying, yes, of course that's what happened. And Lori Lightfoot grabs the mic and goes, don't you bait us. She can't handle it. She doesn't know how to handle people asking a difficult question. They freak out. Don't you bait us. How dare, Pelosi does it all the time. How dare you? How dare you? Remember? They couldn't stop talking about it in Charlottesville. It's all Trump's rhetoric. It's all Republican rhetoric. That's what happened at Charlottesville. When a Bernie Sanders supporter shot Steve Scalise and other Republicans he shot at a ball field because he thought that tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people would die because of the Republican health care plan. And Nancy was asked, look, you said rhetoric from the other side caused the Charlottesville. Do you think Democrat rhetoric caused this? How dare you, she said. How dare you suggest that? It's obvious. They don't have pushback. I feel bad for them. They've never had to actually respond to criticism. The media's been in their pocket their whole career. Everyone's just been sucking up to them. That's what you see with some of these people in Hollywood. When you see someone like Alyssa Milano, who truly believes that she's virtuous and truly believes that people that don't agree with her dislike immigrants, who says things that are so incredibly bigoted, like, if we deported people, who would mow our lawns? Who would paint our fences? Yes, no, Alyssa Milano. To you, people that don't look like you, people of a different ethnicity, they're just the hired help for you. We get it. She doesn't get it. No one's ever been there to been like, Alyssa, come on now. That's a bit much. Sounds a tad racy to me. No one's ever pushed back. It's how Leo DiCaprio could lecture you on climate change as he gets into a private jet and flies 8 hours to go to a convention for 10 minutes. And then talk about, how we need to fight climate change. They don't get it. They think they're different. They've never had pushback. They're not in reality. So it is a privilege to have that stuff. I would rather be hated. I would rather that someone look at me and say, I hate you, than someone look at me and say that they pity me. I mean that with the utmost sincerity. So my heart, I just think all of this, what I see is a lot of these elites, they just look at people of color like, oh, you poor babies. It's insulting. Now, I'm not a person of color, and everyone's an individual. So if you're a person of color, if you're not a person of color, I don't care. You choose to be offended by whatever you want. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that everyone has to agree with me. But just me personally, I think it's offensive. I think that it's a terrible way to view the world. That's how I feel. But, so, that's what's going on. I want to bring someone on. I want to give a good faith effort. And I'm going to push back, obviously, but please explain to me how all these problems are systemic racism. Please explain it to me. And what do we do about it then? If it's all systemic racism, what do we do about it? We end laws that say that you shouldn't give discriminatory or preferential treatment to certain races in our government. We end those laws. That's what we do. Those are the questions I have. And when you see, you know, like, I asked, if you're watching Carlos, I'm in Lamar. Just turning off. Anyways, you know, my friend who's a welder said, can you explain to me what my white privilege is? And one of the examples that was given, here the calls that I'm getting. But anyways, yeah, so my welder friend, he was asked, what's end the video? Someone keeps trying to, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to end the video. Someone keeps trying to call me, so we'll see it. Have a good one, everyone.